My name is Nina Caldwell. I'm 32, and I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who lays her family's ugliest secrets out in public like evidence on a table. But here we are. And if you're reading this, do yourself a favor. Grab something to eat, take a breath, because this story doesn't get messy. It starts messy. It starts with blood and mirrors. I have an identical twin sister named Maya. Same DNA, same face, same childhood photos where even our own relatives had to squint and guess who was who. For years, we were that creepy close twin duo people either adored or didn't know what to do with. When we were little, Maya and I were tight in that way only twins understand, like we shared a private hallway between our thoughts. We switched classes for fun. We swapped homework. We played the same video games until our eyes burned and our mom yelled at us to go outside like sunlight could fix anything. In third grade, we convinced our teacher that I was Maya for almost a month. A whole month. The woman gave my sister my grade on a science project and never noticed because we had this rhythm, this synchronized little performance we'd perfected from birth. We thought it was hilarious. Looking back, it wasn't the switching that mattered. It was how early we learned we could stand in each other's place, and the world wouldn't know the difference. Nobody tells you the quiet horror of having a twin. Sometimes one of you grows into a functioning human being, and the other one marinates in toxicity until she becomes a perfect replica of your worst nightmare. Our parents were a matched set of disasters. My dad worked as a regional sales manager for a medical supply company, which meant he spent 40 hours a week smiling at people he didn't respect, and the rest of his time making sure everyone at home felt small enough to fit in his shadow. My mom was a legal secretary. She made decent money, more than enough for a normal, stable life. But she never saw the benefit of it. Dad controlled every dollar like he was a dictator guarding a pile of gold. He called it managing the household finances. What it really meant was my mother had to ask permission to buy shampoo. We grew up in a cookie-cutter, three-bedroom house in the suburbs outside Phoenix. From the outside, it looked like a brochure for the middle class. Trimmed lawn, decent paint, quiet street. Inside, you could smell the dysfunction the second you walked through the door. Stale cigarette smoke that clung to the curtains, cheap liquor sweating out of Dad's pores, and the lingering scent of whatever argument had already happened before dinner. Dad had a pattern. He'd roll in around 7 every night, already 3 drinks deep from whatever bar he'd stopped at after work. Mom would have dinner waiting, because of course she would. She'd stand over that stove after working her own full day, like feeding him was the last thread holding the house together. He'd take one bite and start in. "This tastes like cardboard," he'd say, pushing his plate away like she'd served him poison. "My mother could cook. What's your excuse?" And Mom would just sit there. Take it. Every insult, every degrading comment, every time he compared her to his sainted mother who'd been dead 15 years. She'd nod like she agreed, like she really was the worthless wife he said she was. The money thing was worse. Dad convinced her years ago to put all her paychecks into his account. He said it was more efficient, easier for him to manage everything. What it actually did was turn my mother into a woman who had to beg her own husband for gas money. He'd grill her over receipts like she was embezzling. "$40 for shampoo and conditioner?" he'd yell, waving the paper like it was a crime report. "What are you trying to do? Bankrupt us?" Meanwhile, he'd drop $200 at a bar in one night without blinking. Maya and I learned early to make ourselves scarce when Dad came home. We'd hole up in our room with the TV cranked, trying to drown out the shouting from the kitchen. I'd put headphones on and disappear into music or games. Anything that made me feel like there was a world where people didn't talk to each other like weapons. Maya didn't do that. She'd lie on her bed staring at the ceiling, eyes empty, in a way that made my stomach twist, even when I was too young to name it. Even then, she watched like she was studying. The really bad nights were when Dad came home completely wasted. He'd pass out on the couch, still in his work clothes. We'd find him the next morning smelling like stale alcohol and sweat, mouth open, shoes still on. Mom would clean up around him without a word, sanitize the couch, wash his clothes, pretend nothing happened. Dad would wake up around noon with no memory of the night before, then immediately start looking for someone to blame for his headache. What messed with my head most was Mom never fighting back. Never saying, "No, stop, I won't let you." She took everything with this martyr expression, like suffering was her job. As a kid, I couldn't understand why she didn't leave. Now I know she was in survival mode. But back then, all I knew was that my mother looked smaller every year, and my father looked bigger every time he got away with it. Maya saw it all too. Same house, same old man, same front row seat. but somehow she took notes on the wrong parts. High school was when I started noticing Maya wasn't just experimenting the way teenagers do. She was committed. It started with drinking at parties. Normal stuff. Then it was drinks before parties. Then it was drinks instead of parties. By junior year, she was showing up to school with vodka in a water bottle like she'd invented the concept. People started keeping their distance. Nobody wants to babysit someone who's impaired at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Maya chose the bottle. I chose the exit. Fast forward to senior year. I'm 18. Maya and I barely speak anymore. And our parents' marriage is held together by Mom's desperate need to maintain the illusion of normal. Then Mom's aunt died in November of our senior year. Mom had to drive to Tucson for the funeral, which meant leaving Maya and me home alone with Dad for the weekend. We had final exams. We couldn't miss school. I came home from my calculus exam around 3 in the afternoon. Dad's car was in the driveway. That was weird. He usually didn't roll in until after 6. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. No TV. No sounds of Dad rummaging through the fridge. Then I heard it. Rhythmic thumping upstairs. A headboard hitting the wall. And a woman's voice, definitely not my mother's, making sounds that turned my stomach to ice. I took the stairs 2 at a time. The master bedroom door was half open. I pushed it the rest of the way, and there was my father, half-dressed, drunk, with some woman from his office in my mother's bed. My mother's bed. They were so intoxicated they didn't even notice me standing there like a ghost at the edge of my own life. The woman was blonde, maybe around 30. She had my dad's company name tattooed on her ankle like she was branded property. She was laughing between moans, like this was a joke, like disrespect was part of the thrill. Dad was muttering about how much better she was than Mom. How Mom had let herself go. How this woman actually knew how to satisfy him. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, just watching the marriage that had poisoned our house finally show its true face. Then I backed out slowly, closed the door, and went downstairs. I sat on the couch like my body didn't belong to me, staring at the wall until I heard Maya's truck pull into the driveway an hour later. I didn't let her get inside. I met her outside before she could even shut her door. "We need to talk," I said. She looked at me, eyes glassy. Maybe from drinking, maybe from something worse. "About what?" I told her. Everything. The woman, the bed, the sounds, the way Dad's voice had turned my mother into a punchline. I expected shock, anger, anything human. What I got was guilt. Uncomfortable, squirming guilt that crawled across her face like something trying to escape. I went cold. "You already knew," I said flatly. Maya exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. "I caught them a few months ago, at his office after hours." My hands curled into fists on their own. "And you just, what, went along with it?" Maya's jaw tightened. What was I supposed to do? Blow up the family? Cause drama? "The family's already blown up," I snapped. "He's cheating on Mom in her own bed, and you've been helping him hide it. It's complicated." "No, it's not." My voice came out sharp enough to cut. "He's betraying Mom, and you're enabling it, just like you enable all his other nonsense." Maya stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You always need to play hero, don't you? Always trying to prove you're better than everyone else." I laughed once, no humor, just disbelief. "Sometimes marriages are complicated," she went on, like she'd been practicing the line. "Dad has needs Mom isn't fulfilling. That's not our business." I stared at her, stared at my identical twin sister, wearing my face, speaking with my father's cruelty, like it belonged in her mouth. "She's our mother," I said, "and he's destroying her." Maya's expression didn't change. "If you tell her and they get divorced," she said calmly, "I'm blaming you forever. Every piece of fallout from this is on your head." The air felt thick, electric. "Then blame me," I said, "because I'm telling her the second she gets home." We didn't speak for the rest of the day. Maya locked herself in her room like a child hiding from consequences. I stayed downstairs watching the clock, listening for Dad's footsteps, waiting for Mom to come home so I could do the one thing nobody in that house ever seemed willing to do. Say the truth out loud. Dad and his mistress eventually stumbled out around 6. Both of them froze when they saw me sitting on the couch. Dad's eyes narrowed immediately. He sobered up just enough to understand danger. He tried to threaten me into silence. Low voice, hard stare, the same intimidation he used on Mom. I didn't say a word. I just stared at him until he left. Mom got home around 9. She looked exhausted from the funeral and the 4-hour drive. Her shoulders were slumped, face drawn like grief had carved new lines into her skin. For a second, I almost didn't have the heart. Almost. But then I remembered the bed, the laughter, the way my father had spoken about her like she was disposable. "Mom," I said, "sit down." She blinked at me, confused, glancing toward the hallway where Maya had finally emerged, hovering like she already knew what was coming. "What's going on?" Mom asked. I told her. All of it. The affair, the woman, the fact it had been happening for months, the fact it happened in our house, in her bed. Maya tried to interrupt, tried to say I was exaggerating. I kept talking over her. Then Dad walked in right in the middle of my explanation. He tried to deny it at first, said I was lying to cause trouble. But Mom's face told me she already knew something. Maybe not the details, but deep down she'd suspected. "Is this true?" she asked, voice weirdly calm. Dad didn't apologize. He got defensive. "So what if it is?" he snapped. "You think I'm supposed to stay faithful to someone who can't even keep me interested? Look at yourself, Linda. You've gained weight. You dress like a grandmother. You're boring in bed. What did you expect?" I watched my mother's face shift, like something inside her finally broke, or finally woke up. She stood, and she slapped him. Hard enough, the sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Dad stumbled back more from shock than the force, hand pressed to his cheek, eyes wide like he couldn't believe she'd dared. Mom's voice went quiet. But it wasn't weak. It was final. "I'm done," she said. "Girls, pack your things. We're leaving." I was already moving toward my room when I noticed Maya wasn't following. "Maya," I said, turning back. "Let's go." She looked at Dad, then at Mom, then back at Dad. And then she sealed our fate forever. "I'm staying with Dad." Mom's face went pale. "Maya, honey, please." Maya's voice was firm, almost rehearsed. "I'm not leaving because you can't handle reality. Dad needs someone here, and I'm not abandoning him over some family drama." Mom's voice cracked. "He cheated on me, in our bed." Maya didn't flinch. "Yeah, well," she said with zero emotion, "maybe if you took better care of yourself, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. Can't really blame him." I didn't think. I just lunged. We crashed into the coffee table, fists flying, years of swallowed rage finally choosing a shape. I got in 3 solid punches before Mom screamed for us to stop. We separated, both breathing hard. Blood at Maya's lip, my hands shaking. Dad pointed at the door like a king passing judgment. "Get your stuff and get out. Both of you." And we did. Mom and I packed what we could carry into duffel bags and trash bags. We loaded her car and left. Dad stood in the doorway yelling about how we were abandoning the family, how we'd regret this, how Mom would come crawling back when she realized she couldn't make it on her own. Maya stood next to him, and for just a second I saw doubt flicker across her face. But she stayed, and that was that. The first betrayal. The one that taught me my twin sister didn't just survive our father, she absorbed him. And one day, she'd use what she learned against me. We lived in a cheap motel for 3 weeks. Not the kind with cute neon signs and retro charm. This was the kind where the carpet always felt damp. The ice machine made a dying animal noise, and you could hear other people's lives falling apart through the walls at night. Mom paid in cash at first. Then she started putting it on a credit card Dad didn't know about, one she'd opened quietly a year earlier and hid inside a legal pad like it was contraband. That's how I learned something important about my mother. She wasn't weak. She was strategic. She'd been surviving. Every day in that motel, she woke up before sunrise and sat at the tiny table by the window, staring at a notebook like it was a map out of hell. I'd watch her from the bed, pretending to sleep, while she wrote lists. Apartments, lawyers, bank accounts, what she needed to move, what she needed to prove. Because Mom had finally stopped hoping Dad would change. And once hope dies, you can do a lot of things with the space it leaves behind. She opened her own bank account for the first time in her adult life. I still remember the look on her face when she got the paperwork back, like she'd just been handed a new identity. Not Linda Caldwell, wife of a man who treated her like property. Just Linda, a woman with her own signature, her own account, her own control. Her aunt, the one who'd just died, had left her $18,000. Not a fortune, but it was a door, and Mom kicked it open with both feet. She found us a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Not fancy, but clean, safe, quiet. The first night we moved in, I slept like I'd been underwater my entire childhood, and someone finally pulled me up to breathe. Then the divorce started, and it got ugly fast. Dad didn't just want to punish Mom. He wanted to break her. He called her greedy, vindictive, a gold digger. He told everyone who would listen that she was trying to destroy him financially, like she hadn't been handing over every paycheck for years while he poured money into bars and women. But the courts didn't care about Dad's performance. Adultery in the marital home. Financial control, verbal abuse, and me, an 18-year-old with a mouthful of truth and a memory too sharp for his comfort, ready to testify. The judge listened. The judge saw, and Dad lost half of everything. The house was sold. His retirement account split, savings divided down the middle. Dad was livid. He sent voicemails screaming that Mom would regret this, that she'd be crawling back, that the world was going to chew her up without him. And every time he said it, I imagined Mom's entire future getting brighter out of spite. Maya called me exactly once during the proceedings. I was in the parking lot outside a grocery store, pushing a cart I didn't know how to afford yet, when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in weeks. I answered before I could stop myself. Her voice came through rough and sharp. "You happy now?" I didn't speak. "You ruined everything," she said. "Dad's drinking more than ever. He's depressed. He's falling apart. And you know what? That's on you." Something in my chest stayed calm in a way I didn't expect. "Good," I said. Then I hung up. And we didn't talk again for 7 years. College became my clean slate. I got into Arizona State on a scholarship that wasn't huge, but it was enough to make escaping feel official. I moved into the dorms with a duffel bag of clothes and a heart that didn't trust anyone. Mom was thriving too. She got promoted at the law firm. She started wearing lipstick again, not for Dad, not for anyone else, just because she wanted to see her own face look alive. She stopped apologizing when she walked into a room. I didn't realize how much she used to apologize until she didn't anymore. That's where I met Ethan. It wasn't love at first sight. It was quiet recognition. He was in my Bio 101 class, always sitting a few seats away, taking notes like he actually cared. Hair always a little messy, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. One day after an exam, I was standing outside the lecture hall trying to breathe through the anxiety I pretended I didn't have, and he said, "You look like you're calculating 10 different worst-case scenarios." I glanced at him. I always do. He smiled like that wasn't weird. Like it made sense. "Coffee?" he asked. "You can calculate in a safer environment." I don't know why I said yes. Maybe because he didn't push. Maybe because his voice didn't feel like a trap. We ended up talking for 6 hours. Not the usual first date stuff. He told me about his childhood in a small town outside Flagstaff, how he'd grown up with parents who actually liked each other, how he wanted a life that felt simple, not flashy, not loud, just steady. I listened like he was describing a foreign country, because steady wasn't something I'd ever seen up close. I didn't tell him about Dad, not at first. I didn't tell him about the motel, the slaps, the cheating, the way my twin sister's face had looked when she chose Dad over Mom. I waited until date number 4, after he'd proven he wasn't just being charming for sport. When I finally told him, I expected him to flinch, to pull away, to say something polite like, "That's a lot," and then slowly disappear. But Ethan didn't. He just listened, asked questions that felt careful. And when I finished, he said something that hit me harder than any insult my father ever threw. "You did the right thing," he said, "protecting your mom, even if it cost you your sister." The word sister lodged in my throat. Because Maya wasn't dead. But in a way, she was gone. I let Ethan into my life one small step at a time. We dated for 3 years. Moved in together after graduation. Got married a year later at City Hall. Just Mom and a few close friends. No big wedding. Neither of us wanted the stress. We signed papers, had dinner at a nice steakhouse, and went home like we'd made a promise the world didn't need to witness. I landed a job as a database administrator for a tech company in Scottsdale. Ethan worked in operations for a logistics firm. Long days, spreadsheets, deadlines, but he didn't bring his stress home like a weapon. We bought a small 3-bedroom house in Tempe, adopted a German shepherd named Diesel who thought Ethan was his soulmate and me his second in command. From the outside, our life looked like that middle-class brochure my childhood house used to imitate. But inside, it felt safe. Maya wasn't in any of it. I'd hear updates through family sometimes. She worked construction jobs with Dad's connections. She dated random men who never lasted more than a few months. Mom tried at first to keep a relationship with her, invited her to holidays, sent her texts. Maya always found excuses not to show, and the few times she did appear, we'd be screaming at each other within an hour. It was like being in the same room as a live wire. Then Dad died. Heart attack at 59. They found him on his couch with an empty bottle of liquor on the floor. The doctor said his liver was basically destroyed. Honestly, it was surprising he'd made it that long. Mom wanted to go to the funeral. "He was still your father," she said, like that meant something. After everything, I went for her. I wore a black dress I hated and a face that didn't match the occasion, because grief wasn't what I felt. The funeral home smelled like flowers and lies. Distant relatives I barely knew gave speeches about what a great man Dad was. Funny how memory improves once someone's dead. I stood near the back, arms crossed, Diesel's leash looped around my wrist because I didn't trust my hands not to shake. Ethan stood beside me, palm warm on the small of my back. He was trying. I could feel it. Then I saw her. Maya. She was near the casket, eyes red, already intoxicated, and it wasn't even 2 in the afternoon. She spotted me immediately. It was like the air changed. She pushed through the crowd and got right in my face, jabbing a finger into my chest. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she slurred, "after what you did." Ethan's hand tightened behind me. Mom's breath caught. People turned. Maya smiled like she had been waiting for an audience. "You killed him," she said. "You know that? All the stress from the divorce, losing his money, that's on you. You're the reason he's dead." I looked at her, at my twin, at my own face twisted into something ugly, and I heard my father's voice coming out of her mouth. Maya's expression snapped. "Nonsense!" She shoved me hard, and something ancient inside me, something that had been living in my muscles since childhood, reacted before my brain could negotiate. I punched her, clean shot to the jaw. She hit the funeral home carpet like a dropped puppet, nose bleeding instantly. I stood over her, fists clenched, ready to do it again if she got up. And the strangest part? Nobody moved to help her. Not the relatives, not Dad's friends, not the people who'd just praised him like a saint. They all knew what Dad had been, and they knew what Maya had chosen to become. Mom grabbed my arm and hauled me outside before security could get involved. Ethan followed, pale and shaken. The car ride home was tense. Mom stared out the window, silent. Diesel whined like he sensed the storm. And Ethan kept glancing at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Not like he was afraid of me. Like he was disappointed. Like I'd broken some invisible rule of who he believed I was. I tried to tell myself it would pass. That it was just shock. That the violence was a one-time flare-up of old trauma. But something shifted after that day. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Ethan became distant in a way I couldn't quite pin down. Our conversations got shallow. Work talk. Bill talk. What's for dinner talk. The deep conversations we used to have at 2 in the morning about life, about fear, about the future, just stopped happening. He started spending way more time on his phone. I'd walk into a room and he'd close whatever he was looking at too fast, then give me a bright smile that didn't reach his eyes. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd say, "I'm fine, just stressed." I caught him crying in the bathroom a few times. Quiet sobs, almost silent, hidden under running water. When he came out with red eyes, he'd blame it on a rough day at work, or fatigue, or a headache, but the timing never added up. And my gut kept screaming. Our 6th wedding anniversary was coming up. 6 years married, 10 years together. I wanted to do something big, something to remind us both why we chose each other. So I planned a party, a real one. I rented out a nice venue downtown, invited friends, coworkers, family, hired a caterer, open bar, string lights. The whole "we're doing great" performance, except I wanted it to be real. When I first told Ethan, he didn't light up. He looked hesitant. "I don't know if we need something that big," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe just dinner." "Come on," I said, pulling him close. "When's the last time we really celebrated? Let's go all out." He was quiet for a long moment. Then his whole demeanor shifted, like a switch flipped behind his face. He smiled. A real smile. The one I'd been missing. "You know what?" he said. "You're right. Let's make it huge. Invite everyone." And something about the speed of that agreement, how fast he went from reluctance to enthusiasm, should have warned me. Because in my life, sudden smiles usually meant someone had already decided how the story ends. I just didn't know yet that this time the ending was going to wear my sister's face. I told myself I was imagining things. That's what you do when your life has finally stabilized after chaos. You cling to the idea that peace, once earned, is permanent. I had a good job. A husband who'd once looked at me like I was the safest place in the world. A dog who slept at the foot of our bed and barked like hell at anything that felt off. A mother who'd rebuilt her life with quiet dignity. So when the distance between Ethan and me started feeling deliberate, I tried to rationalize it. He was working longer hours. I was taking on more responsibility at work. Life gets busy, right? But the problem wasn't how much time we spent together. It was how absent he felt, even when he was right there. We could sit on the couch watching the same show, and I'd feel like there was a glass wall between us. Like he was somewhere else entirely. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me with this strange expression, half guilt, half fear. Like he wanted to say something and couldn't find the right version of himself to do it. I started waking up before him. That was new. I'd lie there listening to his breathing, studying the ceiling, replaying moments I'd brushed off before. The phone turned face down when I walked into the room. The way he'd flinched slightly when Maya's name came up in conversation, even casually. The way he'd gone completely still when I punched her at the funeral. He never said I was wrong, But he never said I was right either. That silence, it gnawed at me. I tried to talk to him. Not confrontational, not accusatory. Just honest. Do you feel different about me since the funeral? I asked one night while we washed dishes. He didn't answer right away. The pause stretched too long. I just don't like violence, he said finally, staring at the sink. It scared me. I nodded. I get that, I said. It scared me too. But that wasn't the whole truth, and we both knew it. Something else had shifted. Something that had nothing to do with my fist, and everything to do with what Maya represented. Because Maya had always known how to slip into the cracks of people. She was good at it. Good at becoming whatever version of herself someone needed in order to let their guard down. Growing up, she'd learned that survival meant alignment. You align with power. You align with the person who controls the room. And after Dad died, that vacuum didn't disappear. It just looked for someone new to fill it. I didn't know then that Ethan had already been talking to her. Not yet. All I knew was that my marriage felt like it was quietly leaking oxygen. I threw myself into planning the anniversary party like it was a life raft. If I could get everyone together, if I could remind us of who we were when we were surrounded by people who loved us, maybe we'd snap back into place. I told myself I wasn't desperate. I was intentional. The venue was perfect. Exposed brick, warm lighting, big windows overlooking the city. I chose the menu carefully. Not too fancy, not too casual. I wanted everyone comfortable. I wanted Ethan proud. Mom offered to help, but I waved her off. This one's on me, I said. I've got it. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. You always do, she said gently. The night before the party, Ethan surprised me. He brought home flowers, real ones, not grocery store filler. He kissed my forehead the way he used to. Held me longer than usual. For a moment, my chest loosened. See, I told myself, you're overthinking it. He's here. We're fine. But even as we lay in bed, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once. Twice. He didn't check it. Just turned it face down and pulled me closer. I should have asked. I didn't. The day of the party arrived bright and clean, like the universe was trying to lull me into trust. I got ready early. Did my makeup slower than usual. Put on the dress Ethan had once told me made me look untouchable. He watched me from the doorway while I adjusted my earrings. You look amazing, he said. There was something in his voice I couldn't name. Not admiration. Almost resignation. The venue filled up fast. Friends from college. Co-workers. Family members I hadn't seen in years. Everyone smiling, laughing, drinking. Congratulating us. 6 years. You guys are solid. Relationship goals. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. I played the part. I worked the room. Ethan stayed close, but not close enough to touch. And then I saw her. Maya, walking through the door like she belonged there, like she hadn't detonated our family and walked away from the wreckage. She was wearing a fitted jacket, hair styled, makeup carefully casual, not drunk, not sloppy, composed. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I'd missed a step on a staircase. I hadn't invited her. I knew I hadn't. I scanned the room for Ethan, found him across the space. And the second he saw her, his entire face changed. It was subtle, but I knew him. His shoulders relaxed. His mouth curved into a smile I hadn't seen in months. Not polite. Not forced. Real. Maya spotted him at the same time. Her face lit up like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. They moved toward each other instinctively. Too instinctively. I watched them greet each other, her hand touching his arm, lingering just a second too long. His laugh, low, familiar, like he was remembering something private. They leaned in close, heads bent together. Bodies angled inward, shutting the rest of the room out. I felt like I was watching something I wasn't supposed to see yet. Like walking in on a scene that wasn't finished being staged. I crossed the room, weaving through guests, my heart pounding louder with every step. They didn't notice me approach. Too absorbed. Maya had her hand on his chest. His hand rested low on her back. Casual. Intimate. Wrong. Maya, I said. My voice came out steady, even though my pulse was screaming. She jumped back like she'd been caught stealing. Oh, I didn't see you there, she said too brightly. Ethan's smile vanished. Didn't know you were coming, I added, eyes locked on hers. I ran into Ethan a few weeks ago at the grocery store, she said quickly. Thought it would be nice. You know, family. Family. The word tasted rotten. I looked at Ethan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I need to grab something from the car, Maya said suddenly. Ethan, can you help me? The gift bags are kind of heavy. I'll help, I said immediately. No, it's fine, she replied too fast. You should stay with your guests. I'll help, I repeated. Harder this time. The three of us walked toward the parking lot in silence thick enough to choke on. Maya started chattering nervously about the party, how great everything looked, how happy she was for us. Ethan said nothing. Her car was parked near the back. When she opened the passenger door, her phone lit up on the seat. Face up! A new notification. From E. My breath stopped. I grabbed the phone before she could react. Hey! She lunged for it. Too late. The preview showed enough. Can't wait to tell everyone tonight. Should have done this months ago. My hands started shaking. I unlocked the phone, scrolled, and my world split open. Months of messages. Hundreds. Photos I will never unsee. Plans to meet up. Complaints about me. How distant I was. How boring. How safe. How Maya made him feel alive again. And then the message from 3 days ago. Took the test this morning. Positive. We're having a baby. I looked up. Maya was crying now. Ethan's face had gone gray. How long? I asked. My voice sounded detached, like it belonged to someone else. Maya opened her mouth, but Ethan spoke first. Since right after the funeral, he said quietly. About 10 months. 10 months. My twin sister. My husband. After the day I punched her for blaming me for our father's death. After the day, something in my marriage quietly broke. You're pregnant, I said. Maya nodded, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I didn't mean for it to happen, she sobbed. After the funeral, I was so shaken, and Ethan reached out to apologize for everything, and we just started talking, And you thought you'd announce it at my anniversary party, I said, holding up the phone. She flinched. That's what this is? I asked. A public ambush? Ethan swallowed. We thought it would be easier, he said. If everyone knew. If you handled it maturely. I laughed. The sound came out wrong. Harsh. You thought I'd smile while you announce you've been sleeping with my sister and she's carrying your baby? I asked. Maya wiped her face. Everyone respects you. If you gave us your blessing, they'd accept it. We could all move forward. That was the moment something inside me went completely still. Get inside, I said. Both of you. They followed me back toward the venue because they didn't know what else to do. Because they'd miscalculated one crucial thing. They thought humiliation would make me quiet. They didn't realize it makes me precise. The side room smelled like linen cleaner and panic. Stacked chairs leaned against the wall. Extra tablecloths were folded too neatly on a metal rack, like the room existed solely to hide messes before anyone noticed them. I closed the door behind us. The click of the latch sounded louder than it should have. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm in a way that surprised even me. You're going to stand here. You're not going to argue. You're not going to explain, and in a minute, we're all going back out there. Maya shook her head frantically. Nina, please. And I'm going to tell everyone exactly what you've been doing, I continued, looking straight at Ethan now. And you're going to stand there and take it. Ethan stepped forward, hands raised like I was the unreasonable one. You don't have to make this public. We can talk. We can do this privately. You lost the right to privacy 10 months ago, I said. You just didn't realize it yet. Maya reached for my arm, fingers trembling. Please don't. I'm pregnant. This will ruin everything. You wanted everyone to know, I said quietly. Just not like this. Silence fell heavy. I could see Ethan bracing himself, jaw tight, eyes darting like he was already calculating damage control. I opened the door. The music from the venue washed over us. Laughter, clinking glasses, a DJ hyping the crowd. My party. My celebration. I walked straight toward the DJ booth. Didn't hesitate. Didn't look back to see if they were following. I grabbed the microphone. The music cut mid-beat. The sudden quiet rolled through the room like a wave crashing into shore. Every face turned toward me. Ethan and Maya stood near the entrance, frozen. I smiled. The kind of smile that feels like a warning, if you know how to read it. Hey everyone, I said, my voice echoing through the speakers. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It really means a lot to see all of you here celebrating 6 years of marriage with us. A few people clapped. Someone raised a glass. Maya's face had gone pale. But, I continued, I just found out some news that I think deserves to be shared. The room quieted further. You could feel it, instinctive, animal attention. Turns out my husband, Ethan, I said, gesturing toward him, has been sleeping with my twin sister Maya for the past 10 months. Gasps rippled. Someone muttered, "What the hell?" They started right after our father's funeral, I went on, voice steady, each word chosen carefully. And Maya is pregnant with his child. Dead silence. I pointed. They're right there if anyone wants to congratulate them. They were planning to announce it themselves tonight. Thought I'd save them the trouble. For half a second, no one moved. Then the room exploded. What the That's her sister! You're kidding me. Drinks were slammed down. Someone laughed in disbelief. Then the shouting started. You're disgusting. Both of you. Just like her father, no shame. A drink flew. Liquid splashed across Ethan's shirt. Maya tried to speak, hands raised, voice cracking. We fell in love. Oh, shut up, someone yelled back. You don't fall in love with your sister's husband. This is sick. You should be ashamed. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I walked out with my mother. She didn't ask questions. She just took my hand, squeezed it once, and followed me into the night. Ethan called me 43 times, left voicemails that swung wildly between sobbing apologies and quiet demands that I fix this. I deleted them all without listening past the first few seconds. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. By noon, I changed the locks. By evening, I sent Ethan one text. You have 1 week to get your things. After that, they'll be on the curb. He tried to negotiate. Said Maya was pregnant. Said she needed stability. I told him he should have thought about that before sleeping with my sister for 10 months. The divorce was fast. That's the beautiful thing about prenups and public admissions of adultery. There's nothing left to argue about. Ethan got nothing. No house. No money. No alimony. And absolutely no confusion about whose child Maya was carrying. I showed up to exactly one court hearing. Sat across from him while he tried to explain how everything had just happened. I didn't speak. I signed the papers and walked out. 4 months later, I sold the house. Bought a condo downtown, 20th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights like a promise. Diesel came with me. I started training Brazilian jiu-jitsu because anger needs somewhere to go. I went on a few dates. Nothing serious. And through the family rumor mill, I heard how quickly karma stopped being poetic and started being practical. Maya gave birth to a girl. They moved into a cramped apartment in Mesa because Ethan's checks barely covered rent. He started drinking more, just like Dad. Maya went back to work 6 weeks postpartum because they needed money. The baby cried constantly. And for the first time in my life, I watched my twin sister live inside the exact pattern she'd defended. History didn't repeat itself. It recruited her. For a while, I didn't hear from either of them, and I won't pretend that silence didn't feel like oxygen. My life shrank down to things that made sense again. Work deadlines, early morning training sessions, Diesel's schedule, dinners with Mom where we talked about normal things like recipes and bad movies instead of survival strategies. I got promoted. Not dramatically, not with fireworks. Just a quiet email from HR and a new title on my signature line that said I was moving forward whether my past wanted to follow or not. Mom remarried. A man named Frank, steady, kind, the kind of man who listens more than he speaks. He treated her like she was precious without making her feel fragile. Watching her laugh with him felt like watching a timeline correct itself. For the first time in my life, the Caldwell women weren't bracing for impact. Then, 2 years after the divorce finalized, my past figured out where I lived. I came home from work on a Tuesday night, keycard buzzing me into the building lobby, Diesel tugging at the leash because he'd decided every elevator was an enemy. That's when I saw her. Maya, standing by the front desk like she belonged there. She'd changed. Not in a dramatic glow-down way, in a quiet erosion way. Her hair was pulled back messily, dark circles carved under her eyes, clothes rumpled, shoulders hunched like she was carrying something heavy she couldn't set down. The security guard smiled at me. Your sister already checked in. My stomach dropped. She said you were running late, he added. Twin thing is wild, huh? I didn't correct him. I walked straight past her toward the elevators. Nina, wait. She followed, boots echoing too loudly against the marble floor. I just need 5 minutes, she said, voice already cracking. Please. I stopped in front of the elevator, turned, looked at her, really looked, and saw my father's future staring back at me through my own face. I didn't invite her in. I didn't hug her. I didn't ask how she was. What do you want? I asked. She swallowed hard. We're not okay. That sentence alone held more truth than anything she'd said in years. I got fired 2 months ago, she continued. We're 4 months behind on rent. Eviction notices are taped to the door. The baby's been sick for weeks, coughing, won't eat. The urgent care said it might be pneumonia, but we can't afford the follow-up. She finally looked at me, eyes red, desperate. I need money, she whispered. 5,000, maybe 10, just to get caught up and take her back to the doctor. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. I didn't move. And Ethan? I asked. Her jaw tightened. He's not good. Drinking again. A lot. Of course he was. I've asked everyone, she said quickly. Mom blocked me. Frank won't even open the door. His family won't help. You're the last person I can turn to. There it was. The full circle moment. And you thought I'd help you? I asked. You're my sister, she said, like it was a spell she could still use. She's your niece. Was, I corrected quietly. Her breath hitched. You don't mean that. I do. She stepped closer. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but she does. She's innocent. I studied her face. Saw the fear, the shame, the anger she was already lining up to throw at me if I said no. And behind it all, I saw the same excuse Dad used every time he hurt someone. I'm sorry, but you have to fix this for me. No, I said. Her face collapsed. What? No, I repeated. You don't get to burn my life down, humiliate me publicly, and then show up asking for a bailout because consequences finally found you. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. She could die, she said, voice sharp now. If it's pneumonia, then maybe you shouldn't have spent rent money on alcohol, I said flatly. Her eyes went wild. You're a monster, she snapped. She's a baby. And her father's an addict who cares more about getting drunk than medicine, I said. Get away from my building before I call security. She lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my arm. Please, she sobbed. Just this once. I'll do anything. I'll go to rehab. I'll do the classes. I'll leave him, I swear. Something about hearing her beg, really beg, made my chest tighten. I unlocked my apartment door, stepped inside, and closed it in her face. I heard her pounding for another minute. Then nothing. I stood there with my back against the door, Diesel whining softly at my feet. A baby. Sick. Living in a place that smelled like mold and cigarettes, with parents who couldn't, or wouldn't, choose her over their addictions. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I made a call. Not to a bank. Not to a lawyer. To Child Protective Services. I gave them the address. Told them what I'd been told. Behind on rent. Unsafe conditions. Substance abuse. A sick infant not receiving proper medical care. I said I was a concerned family member. I didn't lie. I also didn't pretend my motives were pure. I hung up knowing two things could be true at the same time. I was protecting a child. And I was done protecting my sister. 3 weeks passed. No calls, no messages, no screaming in the hallway. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels temporary, like the pause before something breaks. Then at 7:04 a.m. on a Saturday, someone started pounding on my door. Not knocking. Pounding. Hard enough that Diesel went ballistic, barking like the world was ending. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Maya stood there swaying, hair unwashed, eyes bloodshot. She smelled like stale alcohol and cigarettes even through the door. I opened it just enough to step into the hallway. You called CPS on us, she said. Not a question. Yeah, I replied. Her face twisted. They took her, she screamed. They took our daughter. Said the apartment was unsafe. Said I couldn't prove she'd been getting medical care. Said you told them. They took her because you failed her, I cut in. She shoved forward, trying to push past me. That's when 6 months of Brazilian jiu-jitsu took over. I caught her arm, turned my hips, and put her on the floor, hard, fast, not gracefully. She lay there stunned for a second. Then she started crying. Not yelling. Crying. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. For Ethan. For the baby. For Dad. For everything. I messed up. I destroyed everything, and I don't know how to fix it. I looked down at my twin sister. My face, my blood, collapsed on a hallway floor at 7 a.m, drunk, broken, still reaching for someone else to save her. I can't stop, she whispered. I'm just like him, just like Dad. I felt something then. Not pity, finality. Get out of my building, I said. If you come back, I'll call security. If you touch me again, I'll press charges. She looked up at me, eyes red and pleading. I need help. Help. No, I said. You need consequences. I closed the door. This time I didn't listen for her footsteps. I called building security and had her banned permanently. Over the next few months, the truth trickled in through people who still answered her calls. CPS placed the baby with Ethan's mother while parenting requirements were completed. Maya failed her first screening. Ethan failed too. There were programs, classes, mandatory counseling. Maya quit halfway through. Ethan didn't show up at all. They fought constantly. Neighbors complained. The landlord finalized the eviction. Maya left. She packed what she could and moved back to Seattle to stay with Ethan's mother without Ethan. He wasn't invited. Ethan stayed behind. Still drinking. Still blaming me. Still telling anyone who would listen that I'd destroyed his family out of spite. That I'd weaponized CPS. That I was cold. Vindictive. Cruel. What he never said out loud, what he couldn't say, was that CPS didn't take babies away because someone's sister was mad. They take babies away because babies aren't safe. Ethan got arrested twice in 6 months for being intoxicated and disorderly. Lost every job he touched. Crashed on couches until there were no couches left. Maya tried rehab once. Lasted 3 days. Walked out and went straight to a bar. Regret, I learned, doesn't mean change. It just means someone feels bad while doing the same things. I didn't hear from either of them again. And my life? It kept going. I made things official with Ryan, an architect I'd been seeing casually for almost a year. He didn't flinch when I told him my past. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened and stayed. I earned my blue belt, bought a new car, started sleeping through the night. Mom glowed. Frank adored her. For the first time, our family dinners didn't feel like a ceasefire. Last I heard, Maya was still drifting, apologizing one week, blaming me the next. Ethan was still in Arizona, still drinking, still explaining his failures like they were misunderstandings instead of choices. And me, I moved forward. No reunion, no forgiveness montage, no redemption arc, just distance, boundaries, and peace. Because that's the thing people don't like admitting about regret. It doesn't matter if you're sorry. It matters if you change. And some people never do.